world of GamerZone. I'm Meredith O'Donnell.
And I'm David Stickman. Today we're going to be discussing a lot of stuff on game development. Last couple of episodes, we didn't get a chance to do some of the game development segments we normally do. Last episode, we actually did shoot it. And, well, didn't really care for what we came out with. There was a couple of little issues.
You keep saying we. I wasn't here, so he's got a frog in his pocket, I guess.
Well, but you're part of the show, so...
Apparently the show falls apart if I'm not here, and then...
Yeah, whatever. Point being.
Anyway.
We ended up with way too much show as it was, so we ended up cutting out the last week's segment, and we're going to do it again this week, a little better. Plus, we're also doing the upfront introduction to a new segment that we're going to be doing, which is we're tracking a game that's in development from beginning to end. We're only going to be doing about a minute every week of it, but this sets up for it and tells you a little bit about the process that we're going to be going through. But the first thing we're going to be covering, news. E3 has always been one of the defining things for game players, game publishers, and game press. This is the event that everybody shows up to. Everybody pulls out all the stops. Millions and millions are spent every year on E3. Game development comes to a complete halt because they make this mad rush to get their demos ready. They show up at E3 to show it off because you gotta be cool looking with it. E3's dead. All right, maybe not quite dead. What happened was most of the publishers and the Entertainment Software Association that does it kind of come to the conclusion the way things work right now, it's a lot of expenditure, both money, time, and resources, and the publishers are no longer getting out of it what they really wanted. Well,
that's basically because there's too many publishers in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, I can't imagine being, Activision or some of these guys who have a new game coming out, and they're essentially standing in a room with 50,000 people saying, "Hey, look at me, and trying to get their attention, especially because game press like us, this is going to be much better for, because throughout the year, now you're going to get more releases all the time instead of people saving it up for the big events.
So E3 isn't dead, it's just being reincarnated into something else.
Yep. E3 is expected to only have about 5,000 people in it next year. Nintendo has confirmed that yes, they will be showing up at next year's E3, but it's essentially a press-only and a publisher-only event now. General people won't be going to it to see it, and it's going to be a lot more limited, which actually is a good thing for a lot of the game developers.
Let's talk about Second Life. They're coming out with a something they're calling expressive puppeteering. I'm excited about that for uses in other games, but before we talk about
Can we just go ahead and say it? World of Warcraft?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
That's usually what I'm excited about, but before we talk about that, we need to kind of explain what
Second Life
is. So I'm going to let you do that since you actually have played on that,
yeah.
And I haven't. So
Second Life is an interesting thing in the fact that it's an MMO. Not an MMORPG, not an MMO first-person shooter, nothing. It's just a huge social environment that people get together and do things in it. There's shops. You can create your own objects on the fly. There are games within it. There are roller coasters within it. User-created content is what drives it. It's pretty impressive that way. On the flip side, it's definitely not an environment for kids at all. In fact, they have a separate product called Teen Second Life that covers the younger crowd, because there's a lot of adult content. In fact, probably I'm going to estimate about 1/3 of Second Life is geared around
adult content.
Yeah.
We'll just
yeah.
Adult content.
Yeah, well, I use the words in there for it. But the interesting part about it is user-creatable content on the fly, user-creatable actions. Your avatars have just unbelievable amount of customizability. It's really a neat environment.
So Linden Labs.
Linden Labs is the creators of it, yes.
And they're coming up with technology called expressive puppeteering, which is basically what Second Life was made for. It's so that you can make your own waves and make your own actions.
Yeah, including theoretically, and I say the word theoretically, doing it on the fly. If you want to do something unique, well, your character will be able to do that. in theory. The reality, we got to see how this actually is implemented and how it comes out. If they pull it off, this could be something I'd be excited about seeing in, as you pointed out, World of Warcraft, yeah, and a lot of other games. It would be really neat to be able to have that sort of flexibility.
To be able to create something on your own, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things, of course, we have our Breaking into Games segment, which is the idea of, hey, how do I get into game development? A couple of students from DigiPen just showed how it works. They won the Independent Game Development Festival. With their title, they ended up running into a couple of people that were from Valve, who does, Counter-Strike and Half-Life 2. And they said, hey, you ought to show this off to Gabe Newell, the head of Valve. They did. He's hired them on the spot. In fact, not only did they hire them, they ended up doing new content, which is going to be for Half-Life Episode 2, which is called Portal.
Portal's cool.
Portal's cool, Portal's neat, and Portal is very different. It's a single-player only experience, though they did mention that in the future they might be looking at some multiplayer stuff.
And it's puzzle-oriented.
Yeah, it's very different, very different.
We'll show a clip later.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yep. But it does show that, yes, having a strong demo, showing off your abilities to a publisher or development company will get you a job potentially. And it's something we'll cover again on another episode of Breaking into Games.
So speaking of Valve, everybody knows who Valve is. And most everybody knows what Steam is.
Right. It's, in case you don't know, Steam is a content delivery system. Basically, you have a little program, it lists out all the possible games that you can pick up, and you go, oh, hey, I wonder what that game's like. You can check out the demo right there. Neat, great. Buy it right there, download it right to your machine. You don't even have to go to a store. It's a lot better than web browsing for games in a lot of ways. And the coolest part is, let's say the developer publishes an update, it's automatically updated on your machine.
But it is only for PCs.
The PC.
But Macs are going to get something very similar. The system for Mac is going to be called Gamerhood, and Aspire is creating it. And it's basically going to be the same thing that Steam is, only it's going to be for Macs. Now, the one problem I have with it, I'm excited about it. I have a Mac, of course, and I think it's a great idea. But the one problem is Gamerhood is really only going to be a couple of blocks long.
Maybe one.
There's not a whole lot of games out there for the Mac, much to my chagrin. But there's a article we read on Cider.
Yep.
And basically this is a program, is it like a plug-in for games?
It's actually a tool for developers to more quickly get their games that were already developing on the PC. Kind of wraps up their games.
Right, so it's not something that a buyer would buy, it's something that a developer buys to attach to their PC game. That way, when they create a game, they don't have to create the PC version and the Mac version. They can create the PC version, attach this piece to it, and Macs can use it.
Yep. Pretty much how it boils down, and I'm really excited about it. My question, though, is there's more than one part to game development. And whether or not developers actually pick this up matters on whether or not they're interested in handling the next portion, which is the marketing, the packaging, the content delivery. Developing the game for both Mac and PC is only half the equation. So it's kind of curious to see whether or not anybody really is going to adopt this. I hope they do.
But Macs are becoming so popular. I mean, they're a lot more mainstream than they used to be. I mean, it's not that they ever went away, but you see commercials of Macs and you see people walking around with Macs a lot more than you used to.
Well, Mac laptops, especially walking around with Macs, Mac laptops are now 11% of sales, I believe it is, for the entire market.
So I'm crossing my fingers.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Speaking of downloadable content, Microsoft has announced their list of upcoming titles for Xbox Live Arcade, basically their downloadable game system. A lot of old classics are represented in there, Tapper, Paperboy, a number of other ones. This is great. I'm glad to see Microsoft didn't just throw a couple of titles out there and call it good. They seem to have made a strong commitment to this happening. And of course, me as an independent game developer, I look at this as great because it allows developers to get onto a platform they normally wouldn't. It also allows gamers, though, to get access to titles that they would never see the shelves normally. Clyde the Clone is a great example of this. Very bizarre little game. I could never imagine seeing it on the shelves as an Xbox 360 title, but as a download, it makes a lot of sense.
So it seems like downloads are the way to go, much to Sony's dismay. Well, or have they changed their mind on that?
They seem to have changed their mind a little bit on that, because the last comment I read was that, oh, well, the PS4 might not even have a physical hard drive. Wait a minute, weren't these the same guys that said hard drives don't matter, nobody cares about local storage, and nobody cares about downloadable content? These guys are really not doing well lately.
Not really, no. Well, I think that's it for the news.
And when we come back, we'll be talking a little bit about Breaking Into Games Part 3, along with our other little section of game development stuff.
Forget punching monkeys. Forget boring banner ads. Forget pop-up windows. Your customers have already forgotten. Let Midnight Rider Productions move you into the future of internet advertising. We provide placement in our existing product lineup for advertisements, production services for online video advertising, and for cable and television advertising. Don't let your customers forget you. Remember Midnight Rider Productions.
Welcome back to the world of GamerZone.
Now we're going to resume our Breaking Into Games segment. This is actually Part 3. The first segment, we covered a little bit about the different types of game developers: professional developers, hobbyist developers, basically called modders most of the time, and independent developers. Part 2, we covered the advantages of becoming an independent developer, like myself. This time, we're going to cover the gloom and doom part of independent development. Basically, we're going to talk about the disadvantages to it, the serious challenges that become involved with independent game development. We've talked about the fact that, hey, whatever money you make, you're going to make a better slice of it. Well, part of that is whatever money you do make. Simply put, you're the entire marketing department most of the time. Now, when I say all of this, keep in mind, I'm referring to the guy who's considered to be the head guy of the project. If you're just well, I shouldn't say just an artist, but if you're an artist doing a small segment of the project, you may not be as concerned about some of this stuff. The head guy, he is team management, he is marketing, he is the business development portion, he is all of these things wrapped up.
He's the financer.
Oh yes.
That's a lot of hats.
That's a lot of hats to wear, and frequently it's way too easy to drop the ball on one. My favorite one to drop the ball on, that I do almost all the time, horrible at marketing. I know how to do it, I just don't do it as much as I should. We, as independent developers, also have to put up with some interesting constraints that you wouldn't normally as a professional developer. As you pointed out, you're financing it yourself. Well, that means that if you're financing it yourself, most likely you've also got a day job. Well, when you get home from flipping burgers at McDonald's or doing accounting for some firm or what have you, now you turn around and you face the day again anew, working on your own project. So if you want to get a project done quickly, you're going to be putting another 6 hours into the day. This makes for extremely long days and extremely high chance for burnout.
You really almost have to feel like, you have to love it.
Yes.
It can't feel like a job. The minute it feels like a job, you're gonna start to burn out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So,
well, you've seen me do this grind before.
I've seen you do it a lot.
And it is difficult. I did it both as having a day job and doing it as my night job and doing it just full time. The financing portion, there's a couple of different ways to look at things. You can look at your time as being free. Basically, if you put 6 hours a day, 7 days a week into a game, and you consider it to be free time, well, game development's cheap then. If you take that same time and you multiply it out by what you make an hour, let's say you make $10 an hour. Well, suddenly that game doesn't look so cheap for development, does it? And did you actually, in the course of the sales for the game, did you actually make all that money back? Well, I've made my money back off of 1 out of the 7 titles I've done. Now, I gotta admit, the one I'm very proud of, the other 7, we don't talk numbers about so much. The other thing is you're going to be creating your own entire team. It's very unlikely, as a matter of fact, that all your team is based in the same city. You might be lucky. You might be a college student that has a bunch of friends, one that's an artist, one that's a sound guy, one that's a 3D modeler, and put it all together. More likely than not, you're actually going to be doing part of it across the internet. I've been there with this. I've watched as team members disappear. You don't hear from them again, and you kind of wonder, hey, whatever happened? If you don't have the proper agreements, their content is no longer usable in the game. If you're giving them a portion of the project as their payment for the project, well, when I say a portion of the project, I mean from the proceeds of sales. If you're giving them a percentage of that, that's what I mean by part of project. If you are doing that, well, then you've got to work pretty dang hard on the marketing part, because no longer are you just going to support your own self with the money. You got your team that you're going to support, because you're going to probably want to do this again. If you fail this time, your team's going to dissolve and you're going to have to start all over again. There's more woes to being an indie than there is upsides in a lot of ways. Now, the freedom is great, and
the payoff can be
the payoff can be absolutely wonderful. There are rare occasions where independent game development teams have just blown the doors off the market with things.
And then there's always the chance that you create something really great. You show the head of Valve and you get a
full-time job. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, while I talk about breaking in the games, the independent portion of this, as from the money standpoint, yeah, you could do it for free too. And in this case, the DigiPen students that showed their work off to Valve, they were doing it for free. And while that's great, that's if your goal is to go out and get a job. If your goal is not to go out and get a job and just produce your own production facility and own game development company, well, then that may not be the track for you. The other thing about becoming an independent game developer that's extremely important, everything relies on your motivation. If you are the team leader, if you are the programmer, if you are any of these team members, if you don't do your part, the game never gets done. You can't just easily replace one person's work with another person's work. It's not that simple. I've had to try that before, and I was not pleased with what the results are. So basically, you're going to have to come up with a good idea. You're going to have to execute it. You're going to have to put the team together, and you're going to have to finance it all yourself. Good luck, guys. And one of the things that we've wanted to do with the show is inform people a little bit about game development. We're doing that with the Breaking Into the Game segment, but we also wanted to go a little further with this. We're going to take a game in development and track its progress every week. It's only going to be like about a minute-long update that says, hey, what did we do this week? So where do you start on developing a game? Actually, it's pretty simple. You start with an idea. Most games out there, not all of them, but most of them can be described in one sentence. As a matter of fact, a great example is, let's say you're going to start a new game, and what you want really is a combat version of chess. Well, it's played from a first-person perspective where people actually step into the chess pieces to combat it out. Oh, here's an easy one. It's Half-Life 2 with chess. This is actually the verbiage that you'll hear a description of a lot of games through publishers and game developers. Well, what are you making? Well, I'm making blah, blah, blah. What is it? Well, it's Half-Life 2 with swords. It's battle chess with rocket launchers. It's Worms with a medieval feel. It's easiest to use these bases to describe a game in one sentence because most people know the gameplay of a lot of these things, or they can quickly reference the gameplay of it and see what it is that you're going to change. There are some rare exceptions. Katamari, for instance, you couldn't describe based on anything else. In fact, you'd have a hard time describing, period. Second.
What is Katamari?
No, you roll around.
It's kind of funny you said you couldn't explain it, and now I'm asking you to explain it. But
well, you have a guy, and his job is to roll around this little ball of stuff. And as he rolls around the little ball of stuff, it gets bigger. So you start out by picking up little bits of fluff off the ground.
You were absolutely right.
It's hard to describe. Rarely do games break ground in such a way that you can't describe them that way. The second portion of this, now that you got the germ of an idea, you got the core concept, now think out, how's it going to play? Well, it's great to say Half-Life 2 with chess and people play it first person. Now you got to figure out how is that flow going to really work. Game flow is actually kind of hard to do at this point because it's all kind of concepts. It's not necessarily anything you're going to play with yet. It's thinking it out. Once you get to the point that you think it out, there's a process where you can create something called a design document, or you can wing it. I've done both. I've done a design document for a game that was 7 pages long. I've also just winged it before. Pretty much had the same results either way. It's all up to you on how you want to do it.
That seems a personality style, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. So next, now that you've got your concepts, you got a little bit of your design work done, now you're going to sit down and start doing the first initial draft of programming and development. So now you have to actually start to break down and start building the game.
Now, are there different engines that you can use based on what your idea is, or is there a standard way everyone builds? Does everybody start the same way? Or you said Half-Life 2. You said it's like Half-Life 2 with, but it's a chess game.
Yeah.
So do you actually take Half-Life 2 and modify it, or do you?
Sometimes you do. For instance, let's say you wanted to write, well, we'll keep going with this one example, which, by the way, this is not the game that we're going to develop. Half-Life 2 with chess. In that case, if you're wanting to do it commercially, no, you wouldn't start with Half-Life 2 most likely. You could license what's called the source engine. That's the Half-Life 2 games engine. Mm-hmm. You could start with the source engine, but you're going to have some pretty good cash to do that. Some of these engines, Quake 3 or Quake 3/Doom engine, you're talking $250,000 to $500,000 just for the engine.
Okay.
Though you do get good support with that. On the flip side, you can start from scratch. If you're going to do it commercially, or basically if you want to make money doing this, you can start from scratch. Just an empty notepad, and away you go. This is the long route for doing it. The truth is, you're probably going to start somewhere in between. One of my favorite products to use is Torque's game design engines that they have out there. They actually have they have 3 different types of engines. One that supports all sorts of fancy shaders, one that's a mid-range 3D engine, and one that's a 2D engine. For this one, we're actually going to use the 2D engine.
Is this also costing money, or?
Yep.
Are there free ones?
There are free ones. There's some debate on whether they're better or worse. The advantage to the free ones,
Well, they're free. That's a huge advantage.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the big portion of it. The other thing about the free ones versus the commercial ones is who did the development. Torque's game engine, for instance, or Garage Games, is owned by a couple of guys who wrote video games for a living. Jeff Tunnell, who used to be the head guy up there, he's done 47 games, has been producer on 47 games, I think it is, something ridiculous like that. Tons of stuff. He's got tons of experience. The game developers themselves that do the programming have so much experience under their belt. So in this case, what you're getting is their experience for free. Well, or in this case, $100. Their engine's actually pretty inexpensive. They have multiple ones scaled to different size projects. So you got a lot of choices there. They're by no means, though, the only ones for sale. Nor does it mean that the only choice is a small or mid-range project like this. As I said, if you have the money around, and if you're wanting to start a big development house, well, for $500,000, you can get a heavy-duty grade engine with heavy-duty support behind it. Good luck with that. I'd really love to be able to afford such a thing.
Yeah.
Next, after you got that done, it becomes a process of doing your initial programming to create your concept on screen. This is not by any means a finished game. This is just pieces moving around. Does this work the way that you think it ought to work? Is this going to be worth you putting more effort into? Stopping and checking your project at this point means you can make the decision of, man, I was wrong. This really sucks. Or going, this is great. Let's keep going. Once you've gotten to that point, it's time to assemble your team. You're going to need graphics. You're going to need sound. You're going to need level designers. You're going to need all of these little bits and pieces. These bits and pieces are actually the hard part. All the stuff that I described up to here, easy. This, hard. And I already just covered in the previous section why it's hard. Again, good luck, guys. But if you get to this point, you're doing pretty good. It's now a case of iterative gaming. You create, design, get a lot of these voids filled in, have people test it out for you. Have some third parties check out your design. Make sure that you're not the only one that thinks this is a cool idea. I've had one game that I thought was cool. Oops.
Now, is this a good time to maybe figure out a tutorial or figure out how you're going to, since people are looking at it?
Not really. Actually, just the opposite. Gameplay should always be self-evident. So you should be able to pick up most popular games. You should be able to pick them up, play right off the bat. If you have to spend 15 minutes explaining how to play the game, wrong answer. Try again. You need it simplistic in its pickup for a new player. By this process of iterative gaming and iterative design, as you're going through doing your programming, doing your development work, doing your level design, it allows you to more narrowly focus in on what aspects that you like. Because you're an independent, you get to do what you like. And what your potential customers like, which they're the buyers. If you want to make money, you still have to make them happy. As this process goes along, basically, you continue on until you get to the point where you need to do wider testing. Is it stable on everybody's machines? Does it break? Does it continue running after 5 minutes? Things like this. Beta testing.
Testing.
You would know all about that too.
I would know a lot about platform testing.
Yeah, and so you know it's also not a simple thing either.
No.
And a lot of non-obvious stuff comes up.
Install testing.
Install testing, oh boy.
Functionality, yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yep. At this point, once you've gotten to the point where it's passed through testing, your game design is done, then it becomes time for marketing. Oops, actually it became time for marketing before the platform testing, before you really got to the point that you were doing testing installers. You have to pre-hype the game a little bit. Tell people it's coming. Once you've got into marketing and you've got it released, people are downloading it, now it's maintenance phase. Essentially, you're done for the most part. The process continues along, maintenance, remarketing, things like that over time. And that is the beginning to end of a game. And that's also pretty much the beginning to the end of our show for today.
Thanks for watching.